The court imposes an aggregate sentence of 180 days and 6 years, 8 months, plus 25 years to life and fines as specified.
That video per KABC in LA. The dad who killed his 7-month-old son and then lied about it to the world, wiping away tears as a judge puts him away for more than 30 years in prison, even after his attorney asked for a lighter sentence.
Whoever took our son, please give him back.
I got him out of the car seat and I laid him down and so I could get his diapers ready. And somebody said, "Hola," and that's all I remember.
This is a case that started with Emmanuel Haro's parents claiming on camera the 7-month-old was kidnapped. But the truth in this story, it was far darker and twisted than we could have imagined. What Emmanuel's dad's guilty plea, though, means for his mom, who is still fighting the claims that she had anything to do with her baby's death. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. All right, before we start this episode of On the Case, I need to pause and tell you about this app called Upside that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas and groceries. Upside, it's free to use. I now use it every time I pump gas or go to a 7-Eleven or Taco Bell. And yes, we're talking about real cash back. So after you spend, money will appear in your Upside account that you can transfer straight to your bank. So here's what you do. Download the Upside app for free, buy whatever you plan to purchase, and you pay as you usually do with your debit or credit card. Then file a claim in the app and you'll get money right back. So to find out how much you could save with Upside, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on our screen and use our promo code OTC to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. All right, let's dive into this story. We've been following it for months, and still at this point, the big question is, where is Emmanuel Haro? That question has been asked ever since this story first broke back in August. Now, we do have some new information, and I'll get to what we know about that in just a moment, now that his dad has pleaded guilty to Emmanuel's murder. This is video per KABC of Jake Haro in court for his sentencing this week, and we could see him wiping away tears as a judge put him away for more than 30 years, maybe for the rest of his life. Haro pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the death of his son, Emmanuel. Now, I'll talk to the reporter who spoke to Jake Haro in jail in just a moment and hear how what he was told by Jake compared to what he admitted to in this guilty plea. That reporter was also in the courtroom for his sentencing. Now, before we get into how this case is now playing out, and it's not over when it comes to what's going to play out in the courtroom, I want to bring you back to when this story first broke and caught our attention.
I got him out of the car seat and I laid him down and so I could get his diapers ready. And somebody said, "Hola," and that's all I remember.
So that was Rebecca Haro, Emmanuel's mom, speaking to television cameras with KABC back on August 14th. So she went on TV claiming that she was in the parking lot of a sporting goods store in Yucaipa, California, that's east of Los Angeles. Here's the story she told. She said that they pulled into this sporting goods store and Emmanuel, her 7-month-old child, needed a diaper change. So she said she put Emmanuel down, was going to change his diaper. Her back was turned to the parking lot, and all she heard was someone say, "Hola." That's all she remembered. She then says she woke up with a black eye, and Emmanuel was gone. Now, as of today, it is still unclear where she got that black eye. I know one thing we've looked at and talked about is the black eye seems to have been not as fresh as one that would have happened within the hours that she went on television, that it was a black eye likely from days, if not weeks, before she said all of this went down. Now, when that story broke, though, I mean, obviously the details of it, incredibly shocking and scary, and you had members of the community, you had nonprofits, you had police jumping into action trying to find Emmanuel. Here's Jake Haro on KABC.
Whoever took our son, please give him back.
So you'll notice that Jake had more tears in his eyes when he was receiving his sentence this week than he was when he was on TV lying, saying that his son was abducted. Now, law enforcement said that the Haro story, it just didn't add up. And originally they said they couldn't rule out foul play. That took this story to a whole different stratosphere. Days later, Jake and Rebecca Haro were arrested, and this case went from being about a missing persons to a criminal investigation, and it also became a search for remains. As this investigation went on, a disturbing detail came to light, and that is that Emmanuel likely died, according to law enforcement, as early as on or around August 5th. That's 9 days before his mom was on TV claiming that he had just been abducted. Now, Jake and Rebecca Haro were both originally charged with murder and filing a false police report, and Rebecca is still fighting the charges right now. She may go to trial. She's pleaded not guilty. The Riverside County District Attorney held a news conference after these two were charged, and he laid out what they think happened. Watch this. This is per News Nation.
The filing in this case reflects our belief that baby Emmanuel was abused, a victim of child abuse over time, and that eventually, because of that abuse, he succumbed to those injuries.
Now, it's unclear what specific evidence law enforcement has when it comes to Emmanuel's cause of death, but it's also been unclear exactly what happened to Emmanuel's body. This is what the DA said back on August 27th about that.
Yes, we have a pretty strong indication of where the remains of baby Emmanuel are. So that investigation is ongoing at this time.
The district attorney has not gone deeper into what his office believes happened to Emmanuel's body. There are obviously a lot of theories out there, but it's important to note that we haven't seen law enforcement out actively searching for Emmanuel's body. You know, what does that tell us about potentially what happened, what information they have? But again, they've just said they have a good idea. I'll talk with Brian Rokos of Southern California News Group about that in just a moment, about what all of that means at this point, where Emmanuel's body could be. Will we ever know what happened to Emmanuel's body? It doesn't appear at this point that there was any sort of plea agreement where Jake Haro, because he pleaded guilty, would offer that information, but a lot of information is still sealed in this case. Now, even though Rebecca has stuck to her story, the mom, her husband takes this deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder. And not only that, he was also sentenced for a violation of probation related to a previous child abuse case involving one of his kids with a previous wife. So that separate case was, or seemed to be, concluded in 2023. Jake Haro pleaded guilty to abusing his daughter back in 2018. And to say it was abuse is putting it lightly, because this girl was left with injuries that will last a lifetime. She is still 7 years old. She is wheelchair bound. She had a fractured skull. And for as disturbing as that case is, the judge in that case gave Haro a second chance back in 2023. Haro was sentenced to 180 days in a work release program. Now, in the case involving Emmanuel, Haro's attorney did ask for a lighter sentence of 15 years to life, partly because Jake Haro was in some ways taking responsibility by pleading guilty to murder, not putting people through a trial where they would have to prove that he was responsible. But the judge this time around said there was no second chance. Haro was hit with 25 years to life, which is the max for that second-degree murder charge he pleaded guilty to. And on top of that, he will have to serve at least 7 years, roughly, in prison on a probation violation related to the 2023 child abuse case, and he will have to serve those roughly 7 years before his 25-year-to-life sentence even begins. Now, during his sentencing, Emmanuel's grandma, Rebecca Haro's mom, addressed the court. Here's part of what she said per KABC.
And I stand here with you, asking you to give him the maximum, because I don't want him to give him another chance. He didn't give nobody a chance. He had many chances.
Now, that grandma gave a very passionate speech in court asking for her son-in-law to be sentenced to the maximum amount of time in prison. It's important to note, though, that the woman you just saw speaking there, her daughter is Emmanuel Haro's mom, and her daughter is facing a charge of murder. And her daughter was the one on TV telling the story that Emmanuel was abducted from a sporting goods store parking lot. Everything related to that and what she said on camera, that's all allegations at this point, because Rebecca Haro claims she's innocent, she's pleaded not guilty, and her case is expected to be in court in January. It is unclear how her husband's guilty plea will impact her case. Joining us now is someone who was in the courtroom for Jake Haro's sentencing, has actually spoke to Jake Haro while he was in jail as this case had proceeded on. Brian Rokos with Southern California News Group. Good to see you again. Thanks for being with us here on Law and Crime. What was it like yesterday in court, just how Jake Haro was acting as it seems like his legal situation came to a conclusion?
Right. He had his head down some of the time, but there wasn't a huge reaction. When he pleaded guilty, he a few weeks ago he cried very silently, and he had, it looked like he was wiping tears a little bit yesterday, but there was no audible sobbing or anything like that. Why he was crying, what he was thinking about himself, I don't know.
And he's the only person who will ever know that. He, if I remember correctly, said ultimately he was innocent, right? When you spoke to him in jail, I guess, how did what he admitted to in this plea compare to what he told you when you sat down with him, several weeks ago when he was under arrest and awaiting legal proceedings?
Yeah, when we spoke, he said that Rebecca was innocent, and I said, well, what was your role? And he wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't say, he wouldn't describe it at all. So, that's obviously very different than what he said about Rebecca. And that made me think at the time that he had some role in Emmanuel's disappearance and death, and whether that was intentional infliction of injury or something accidental that happened that he tried to cover up, he would not say at the time. Obviously, he pleaded guilty to intentionally, if not killing the baby, intentionally inflicting harm on him. And
I think one of the big questions when I saw that he was taking a plea, and if you can just walk us through how this works, where, my question was, okay, like, what does the state get out of this? What does the district attorney get out of this? We still at this point don't know what happened to Emmanuel Haro. How did this plea come about? And how was it worked out to get him to plead guilty?
Well, most of the time, a plea deal is done with the cooperation of the district attorney's office. And there could be various conditions of the plea. For instance, you're going to offer information about the case that was previously unknown. Perhaps you would be involved in testifying against other people. But in this case, this was the classic throw yourself on the mercy of the court. The plea was done to Judge Polk, not to the district attorney's office, although the DA's office did not object to the plea. And it was kind of an odd timing, because the same day, but before Jake made the plea to the court, the district attorney's office added a charge of assault on a child under age 8 causing death. And that actually carries a longer prison term, 25 to life, than the second-degree murder charge that Haro pleaded guilty to. And so yesterday in court, and by law, this was a situation where the assault on the child and the murder were part of the same act. And so under California law, you can be sentenced on only one of those because they're part of the same act. And typically, the judge will choose the charge that carries the longest prison term. So in this case, it was 25 to life for assault on the child causing death versus 15 to life for second-degree murder. And the defense argued for 15 to life, whereas the district attorney asked for the 6 year suspended sentence from the previous child cruelty case to be imposed, as well as the 25 years to life. And that's what ultimately happened. Jake got the 6-year suspended sentence for violating probation and 25 years to life. He serves the 6 years first and the 25 to life afterwards. And there were actually a couple of other cases: filing a false police report, 8 months, and a firearms conviction. That was 180 days, and those two were added on to the 6 years. So he's got about 6 years, about 7 years, 2 months that he must serve before 25 to life kicks in. But as far as I know, there were no conditions attached to the plea to the court, such as providing more information, let's say testifying against his wife. Now you actually can testify against your wife or your husband in domestic violence cases, but it's speculative at this point as to whether Jake will have any kind of a role in the continued prosecution of Rebecca.
Because Rebecca, she was the one who was first on television, was the one telling this story that she was assaulted in a parking lot, and that's where Emmanuel disappeared. And, that is allegedly a lie. And she's facing some serious charges. But is there any indication that there's a deal in the works for her? I know she's going to be in court in January, and she's pleaded not guilty to the charges she's facing. Mm-hmm. What does her legal proceeding look like now? Her case look like now, considering that Jake has taken this deal?
Yeah, well, her attorney, obviously her attorney is going to try to make some of these charges, or all the charges, go away. And like I said, Jake told me that she was innocent. Now, it would be hard to imagine she's not innocent of filing a false police report. That seems to have fallen apart. But if she's really innocent of Emmanuel's death, then perhaps the murder charge and the assault on a child under 8 causing death go away, and that would leave a misdemeanor filing a false police report. And if I'm just talking about logically what the defense attorney would be pursuing. I'm not saying that's going to happen. It might be that the district attorney is going to really dig in on this, and that maybe they feel like they have evidence that she was just as complicit as Jake in Emmanuel's disappearance and apparent death. But in California, a misdemeanor, that's maximum 1 year in jail. Let's say that this case gets resolved in February. That's 6 months after her arrest. She's already served 6 months in jail. In California, the credit for time served is often doubled. So, let's say theoretically she somehow makes the felonies go away. She pleads guilty to filing a false police report. She gets sentenced to a year in jail, and then she has a year of credits. She could theoretically walk out. And I don't know that this is going to happen, but that's kind of a logical path for the defense to pursue. And we learned some new dynamics of the family yesterday in court when Rebecca's mom gave a victim impact statement. She said that she had reported Jake to Child Protective Services, and she didn't get real specific about her concerns, other than she said that she told CPS that she didn't like Jake. And apparently CPS went out and visited the house, and according to the grandmother of Emmanuel, CPS said, well, the house looks clean, there's plenty of food in the refrigerator, so we see no reason to take any kind of action. But the grandmother said that after that report she made, that Jake had isolated himself and Rebecca and the children, their collective 3 children, from other family members. So she also made the comment that Jake turned Rebecca into someone she didn't recognize. So perhaps there's some domestic violence there. We all want to know why Rebecca wound up with a black eye. Perhaps there's some control issues. And having heard that in court, you'd have to think that the defense would seize upon that, as a avenue of defense, that perhaps they might say that, well, Jake controlled everything. Rebecca was forced to do everything. Again, I don't know if the attorney Jeff Moore would do that, but that's, having covered criminal justice for quite a while, that's a logical path for the defense.
When you talked to Rebecca in jail, did she give any indication that there was domestic violence in their marriage?
None, and I specifically asked her, how does Jake treat you? Has he hurt you? I asked her that specific question, and she said no. She said he's a great father, a great husband, loving husband, would never hurt a kid. That's what she said. Now, sometimes people are so afraid they don't report abuse. I'm covering a murder trial in San Bernardino where a woman took a frying pan to the head of her boyfriend and killed him. And she said she had endured months of physical and mental abuse and killed him in self-defense, and where the jury is out on that, and we're waiting for a verdict in that case. And she had endured all these beatings and, according to testimony, never told a soul. So you don't know what happens behind these closed doors.
Yeah, and clearly there was so much that happened behind the doors of their home. And I know that there's still just no official idea of where Emmanuel is, as far as what, I remember the DA saying that he has a pretty good idea, but he wouldn't go any further into that. Has there been any movement? And clearly it wasn't, or at least publicly, part of the deal that Jake was doing in pleading guilty, that he was going to, give more information. But is there any idea where Emmanuel Haro is, or any sort of inclination beyond just they have a pretty good idea where he is?
Well, it's kind of a process of elimination, because we saw Jake out on the hillside by that freeway that one Sunday afternoon with the sheriff's investigators looking for the body. And so far as we know, they haven't gone back there. We have not heard any reports from people of, hey, they're digging up this vacant lot. They're digging up this grove. You wonder what sort of place could Emmanuel be where they would have knowledge of it but not be able to find him. And there's various reports, and who knows if they're true or not, that Jake threw Emmanuel in the trash, which means his body could be in a landfill somewhere. And, good luck finding the body of a 7-month-old, in a landfill. And that makes the most sense. But again, I don't know that for a fact, and the authorities have stopped saying anything whatsoever, even if they're searching.
And just for you having covered news in Southern California for so long, and I remember back in August when this story first broke, and then it was, oh my gosh, it was this abduction, and then wait a second, it's not, then they're not cooperating, and then the details start coming out, and there was just so much attention that this story was getting. And I know it's not over yet because Rebecca will be in court. Maybe she takes this to trial and we learn more information along the way. But just knowing that Jake Haro has taken this deal, how do you reflect back on this story in all your years in covering news in Southern California, and just kind of what you'll remember about it and him as he now goes away for at least more than 30 years?
Well, a couple things. One is that anybody who saw the original interview with Rebecca talking about Emmanuel's disappearance, and she didn't have any tears coming out of her eyes. And so many people I've talked to said, well, it was obvious right then and there that she wasn't telling the truth. It's just, a mother's baby vanishes and why isn't she hysterical? There's so much, I've never seen so much social media interest on a case and so much public interest on a case. I mean, this eclipses the case I covered with the Turpin family that had 13 kids that were starved and neglected and abused. And, that did not have the element of a missing child. Since that time, there's been even more development of social media. And so in the Haro case, you have people, not just in Southern California, but across the country. If you have a camera, if you have a phone, if you have an internet connection, you're now a journalist, you're a podcaster, you're a TikToker. And people speculating on the case, and sometimes people had very good sources. I think some of them had what's going to turn out to be correct information that one of the Haros was put in a jail cell with an informant. People emotionally attaching themselves to the case, and people kind of venting online about how sad they are, and it's just, it's made some people emotional wrecks when they have no direct involvement in the case, and just Facebook pages devoted just to this case popping up, and it's just more social media activity on any case than I've ever covered, and to the point where people would speculate about things or make claims that the sheriff's departments had to investigate, and the sheriff in Riverside County complained about that took away resources. So it's just so many pieces of this, moving parts beyond just are Jake and Rebecca guilty of something.
Yeah, and that speculation, I mean, I remember especially in the early stages of it, just the social media feeds and having to, and I know you were talking about having to kind of chase down different leads that were getting attention, and some of them weren't true, and they were even put out there not to be true. It kind of, it's just fascinating to kind of see how these stories get a life of their own, and how you have to see all these rumors, and it's just kind of the world that we live in at this point. We'll see how Rebecca Haro's case plays out. I know she's going to be in court next in January. Brian Rokos with the Southern California News Group. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for keeping us informed on this story that's been getting so much attention.
Anytime, Chris. My pleasure.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.